Hi again, and welcome back to The Savvy Psychologist. I'm your host, Dr. Ellen Hendrickson. And every week, I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. Fish or cut bait. Put up or shut up. There's even a certain saying regarding the bathroom. Whatever you call it, it's the endless conundrum of choice that comes from that pesky thing called free will. We've all been in situations where the choice is anything but clear. How do you know when to keep on keeping on? And when do you wave the white flag of surrender? So for instance, a job that fills your bank account, but drains your humanity one billable hour at a time, should you stay or go? A partner you adore, but with whom you fight daily, stay or go? For better or worse, what we truly want and what is best for us can be hard to tease out. So therefore, this week, we'll talk about 6 tips to help you make tough decisions. Tip number 1 is, would you expect others to do the same? Loyalty, a sense of duty to a larger cause, or plain old fear of ruffling feathers can all complicate matters when we're deciding whether to stay or go. So for example, imagine you land a meaningful job for a noble purpose, but soon you realize your boss is toxic and your coworkers are even worse. You don't want to stay, but quitting feels like abandoning the cause. Or in another example, maybe your once heavenly housemate pulls one too many maneuvers from hell. You want to move out, but you'd hate to burn bridges with this friend. Okay, so try this. Regardless of whether you're inclined to stay or go, when making your decision, ask yourself, would I expect anyone else to do the same? While there's always room for empathy and tolerance, don't ask of yourself what you wouldn't ask of anyone else. If you set a double standard, you're setting yourself up for martyrdom at worst, resentment at best. Tip number 2, make room for some emotion. While making a major decision in the heat of the moment goes about as well as getting a tattoo when drunk, some emotion is necessary for good decision-making. In the 80s and early 90s, teams of researchers found that individuals with damage to the parts of the frontal lobe that feel emotion and produce an emotional drive can't learn from their mistakes or make sound decisions. In other words, your gut is actually in your frontal lobe. The take home? Wait until you're not in the throes of feeling angry, depressed, or freaked out to make a big decision. Luckily, most acute emotions dissipate over time. But also let yourself go with what you feel, rather than just with what you think. Because it turns out, a little emotion is necessary to make your own best decision. Now, on to the logic. Tip number 3, expand the classic pros and cons list. Even Spock would approve of the logic in this classic decision-making tool, the pros and cons list. But consider giving Spock a run for his money by expanding it from 1 list to 2. Pros and cons of staying and pros and cons of going. You might think that these would just be opposites of each other, but you'd be surprised. Listing the positives and negatives of both sides help you dig a little deeper and make a better gut decision with that frontal lobe of yours. Tip number 4, notice how much you're justifying the decision. So a pregnant client of mine was deciding whether to go with a renowned pediatrician who practiced at an underfunded clinic in the inner city or a run-of-the-mill pediatrician who practiced in a fancy suburb. She said she really wanted to go with the inner city doc, but she was worried about finding street parking. She thought it might be tough to get to in the winter. She thought the waiting room was too crowded. It was clear she wanted to go with a suburban doctor, but felt guilty about going the less noble and more convenient route. But you could tell she had made her choice. The point? If you find yourself rationalizing, justifying, and plain old convincing yourself, just do what you really want. Better to shamelessly walk a straight line than twist yourself in a pretzel of guilty explanation. Tip number 5, stand up for yourself before resigning yourself. Assertiveness falls somewhere on the spectrum between passive and aggressive. And it falls somewhere between the two in terms of respect as well. Being passive disrespects you. Being aggressive disrespects your partner. Assertiveness, on the other hand, respects both of you. To be sure, it's hard to make your needs known, but give being politely assertive your best shot before you put the final nail in the coffin of quitting, moving out, breaking up, or stewing in a pool of resentment. And if assertiveness doesn't come naturally to you, imagine yourself in a role where you're both helping and in charge. So use the same voice a friendly doctor might use in firmly instructing you to take all your medication, or the same voice a concerned teacher would use if you failed your last test and she told you to go to tutoring, or the same voice your mom would use in telling you to put on a jacket because it's 40 degrees outside. You're going for caring, but in charge. Now, it's always possible that self-advocacy will fall on deaf ears or that nothing can be changed, but at least you can walk away knowing you stood up for yourself. And finally, tip number 6 is take the choice out of the matter. Now, we've talked about this exercise on the podcast before, but it bears repeating. To make a tough decision, sometimes it can be helpful to test the waters of both outcomes by imagining you don't have a choice. For instance, pretend you're trying to decide between staying or walking from a less than stellar job. First, pretend all other jobs in the universe vaporize. You have to stay in your job. How do you feel? Pay attention to your reaction. Relief, resentment, something else. Next, go the opposite route. Pretend your position is cut. You have to look for another job. Now, how do you feel? Take your feelings and use them as information to make your decision. To wrap up, it's hard to make a big decision. We can't tell the future, we operate with limited information, and emotion both facilitates and clouds our judgment. Sometimes it seems like if you go, there will be trouble, and if you stay, it will be double. Hey, someone should write a song about that. But ask yourself, if you'd expect the same of others, notice your justifications, assertively stand up for your needs before you decide, make your pros and cons lists, and then go with your gut. And you'll come to your own best decision every time. If you love the show, never miss an episode by subscribing to The Savvy Psychologist on iTunes or Stitcher, or listening on Spotify, or get every episode delivered straight to your inbox by signing up for the Savvy Psychologist newsletter at quickanddirtytips.com/newsletters. And of course, check us out on Facebook to find lots of archived episodes no longer available on iTunes. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, and The Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and doesn't substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. Next week, we'll look at why your brain finds stories, movies, novels, campfire yarns so compelling. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week for a happier, healthier mind.